The wine glass caught the light perfectly as Michael raised it high above his head. The entire ballroom fell silent, 200 pairs of eyes turning toward my husband as he stood there in his perfectly tailored black suit, that charming smile spreading across his face like poison. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed across the room, confident and commanding as always, "I'd like to make a toast." My heart started pounding, but I kept my smile frozen in place. I knew that look in his eyes. I'd seen it so many times before, right before he delivered one of his perfectly crafted verbal daggers designed to cut me down in front of everyone who mattered. The crystal chandelier above us cast dancing shadows across the faces of our colleagues. Mr. Blackstone stood near the front, nodding approvingly at Michael. Jessica lingered by the bar, her red dress catching everyone's attention, just like she planned. And there I was, standing in my navy blue dress that Michael had called frumpy earlier, trying to blend into the background. "To my beautiful wife, Rachel," Michael continued, his voice dripping with false affection. The crowd turned to look at me, and I felt my cheeks burn under their stares. "She works so hard here at Blackstone Financial, trying her absolute best every single day." A few people chuckled. They could hear it too, that subtle mockery hidden beneath his words. Michael had perfected this art over the years, the ability to insult someone while sounding like he was praising them. "But you know what they say." He paused for dramatic effect, his eyes finding mine across the room. Time seemed to slow down as I watched his lips form the words that would shatter what was left of my dignity. "She can't even satisfy her husband, let alone this company." The words hit me like a physical blow. The room erupted in a mixture of gasps, nervous laughter, and actual cheers from some of Michael's buddies from the sales department. I felt every eye in the room burning into me, watching for my reaction, waiting to see if I would crumble right there on the marble floor. But I didn't crumble. Instead, I did something that surprised even myself. I smiled wider. Because while everyone else was focused on Michael's cruel joke, I was focused on something else entirely. The digital clock on my phone, hidden in my small clutch purse, read 8:47 p.m. In exactly 10 minutes, at 8:57 p.m., Kate would activate the presentation we'd spent months preparing. 10 minutes until Michael's perfectly constructed world would come crashing down around him. 10 minutes until everyone in this room would see the real Michael, the cheater, the liar, the fraud who had been stealing from the company and destroying lives for years. I raised my own glass, my hand steady despite the storm raging inside my chest. "Thank you, darling," I called out, my voice clear and strong. "You always know exactly what to say." More laughter rippled through the crowd. They thought I was playing along with his humiliation, being the good little wife who could take a joke. If only they knew that in 10 minutes, none of them would be laughing anymore. Michael's smile faltered for just a second when he saw my reaction. He'd expected tears, maybe for me to run out of the room in embarrassment. Instead, I stood there looking calm and collected, like I had a secret that he didn't know about. Which, of course, I did. The biggest secret of his life was about to be revealed to everyone who mattered to his career, his reputation, and his future. And the best part? He had no idea it was coming. As the crowd began to disperse and conversations resumed, I checked my phone again. 8:48 p.m., 9 minutes to go. I took a sip of my champagne and watched my husband work the room, shaking hands and accepting congratulations on his witty speech. He had no idea that these would be the last 9 minutes of his life as he knew it. What do you think Rachel has planned for her revenge? Drop your guesses in the comments below. I bet you can't predict what's coming next. 8 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Michael and I were the golden couple at Blackstone Financial, the successful vice president and his devoted marketing director wife. We had the corner office views, the expensive car, the beautiful house in the suburbs. From the outside, everything looked absolutely perfect. That illusion shattered on a rainy Tuesday morning in March. I had forgotten my laptop at the office and decided to swing by early to grab it before my dentist appointment. The building was mostly empty at 7 in the morning, just the cleaning crew and a few workaholics getting an early start. I used my key card to get into our floor and headed straight for my office. That's when I heard them. Michael's laugh echoed from his office down the hall, followed by a woman's giggle that definitely wasn't mine. My stomach dropped as I recognized Jessica's voice, breathy and flirtatious in a way that made my skin crawl. "We have to be more careful," I heard Michael say through his partially open door. "Rachel's been asking questions about my late nights." "Maybe it's time you told her the truth," Jessica replied. "That you've outgrown her, that you need someone who can actually keep up with you." I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they could hear it. This couldn't be happening. Not Michael. Not my Michael who brought me coffee every morning and told me he loved me before bed every night. Soon. Michael's voice was different now, colder than I'd ever heard it. "But I need to be smart about this. Rachel's not as stupid as she looks. If I'm not careful, she could make things difficult for me here at the company." "What do you mean?" Jessica asked. "Think about it. She knows all my clients, has access to my files. If she wanted to cause trouble during a divorce, she could really damage my reputation. No, I need to handle this carefully. Make her look incompetent first, maybe even unstable. Then when I leave her, everyone will understand why." The words hit me like ice water. This wasn't just an affair, this was a calculated plan to destroy me. I stood there in that empty hallway, listening to my husband of 6 years discuss my destruction like it was a business strategy. Jessica laughed at something he said, and the sound made me want to throw up. Instead, I quietly backed away from his office and left the building. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the rain on my windshield, trying to process what I'd just heard. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things I'd been blind to before. The way Michael would subtly correct me in meetings, making me look foolish in front of our colleagues. How he'd volunteer me for impossible projects with unrealistic deadlines, then act disappointed when I struggled to meet them. "Rachel's been having a hard time lately," I heard him tell Mr. Blackstone one afternoon. "I think the pressure might be getting to her. Maybe we should consider reducing her workload." He was doing exactly what he'd told Jessica he would do, systematically undermining my reputation and competence, making everyone believe I was falling apart so that when he finally left me, no one would question his decision. The worst part was how good he was at it. Michael had always been charming, but now I could see the manipulation behind every smile, every concerned comment about my stress levels, every public joke at my expense that left me looking oversensitive if I objected. At company events, he'd make little comments about our marriage that seemed playful, but were actually designed to humiliate me. "You know how wives can be," he'd say with a laugh when I'd suggest a different approach to a project. "Always thinking they know better." Everyone would chuckle, and I'd force myself to smile along, playing the role of the good-natured wife who could take a joke. Inside, I was dying a little more each day, but somewhere between the 3rd month of watching my husband systematically destroy my life and the 4th month of pretending everything was fine, something inside me changed. I stopped being the victim and started being the observer. If Michael wanted to play games, I decided I could learn to play them too. I just needed to play them better than he did. The decision to fight back came to me on a Thursday night in June. Michael was working late again, or at least that's what he told me. I sat alone in our kitchen, staring at the cold dinner I'd prepared for 2, when my phone buzzed with a text from Kate. "Coffee tomorrow? You look like you need to talk." Kate had been my best friend since college, and she had a talent for reading people that came from her work as a freelance investigator. She specialized in corporate fraud cases, which meant she knew how to find things people didn't want found. The next morning, I told Kate everything. About the affair, about Michael's plan to destroy my reputation, about how trapped and helpless I felt. She listened without judgment, taking notes in that methodical way of hers. "Rachel," she said when I finished, "you have 2 choices. You can let him destroy you, or you can gather evidence and destroy him first." "I don't know how to do that," I admitted. Kate smiled. "Lucky for you, I do." We started small. Kate taught me how to use my phone to record conversations without Michael noticing. She showed me which documents to photograph and how to do it without leaving digital fingerprints. Most importantly, she taught me how to act normal while my world was falling apart. The key, Kate explained, is to let him think his plan is working. Keep playing the struggling wife while you gather ammunition. It was harder than I expected. Every day I had to watch Michael chip away at my reputation while I smiled and pretended not to notice. In meetings, he'd interrupt me mid-sentence to clarify my points, making me look confused and unprepared. He'd volunteer me for projects he knew I couldn't handle alone, then express concern about my declining performance when I struggled. But now I was documenting everything. Every undermining comment, every impossible deadline, every time he took credit for my work. Kate helped me set up a secure cloud account where I stored photos of emails, recorded conversations, and detailed notes about Michael's behavior. The breakthrough came in July when Kate discovered something that changed everything. "Rachel, you need to see this," she said, calling me into her car after work one evening. She had her laptop open, showing me Michael's company credit card statements that she'd somehow accessed. "How did you get these?" I asked. "Don't ask questions you don't want answered," she replied. "Just look at the dates and locations." My stomach dropped as I scanned the charges. Expensive dinners at romantic restaurants on nights Michael claimed to be working late. Hotel rooms booked during supposed business trips that I now realized Jessica had also been absent for. Jewelry purchases from Tiffany that I'd never received. "He's been using company money to fund his affair," Kate said. "That's embezzlement, Rachel. That's a felony." But it got worse. As we dug deeper, we found charges for personal expenses that had nothing to do with Jessica. Michael had been treating the company credit card like his personal bank account for years. Expensive suits, golf club memberships, even payments to a luxury car dealership. "Look at this!" Kate pointed to a series of charges from March. "He spent $8,000 at an electronics store the same week he told you the company was cutting your department's budget." I remembered that week. Michael had come home talking about how tight money was, how we all needed to make sacrifices. Meanwhile, he was buying himself a new home theater system with stolen company funds. Kate and I spent the next month building an airtight case. We tracked every fraudulent charge, every lie, every instance of Michael using his position to benefit himself at the company's expense. We discovered he'd been inflating his expense reports for years, claiming meals and travel that never happened. The most damning evidence came when Kate managed to access Michael's work computer remotely. We found folders full of my marketing proposals and campaign ideas, all with Michael's name on them instead of mine. He'd been stealing my work and presenting it as his own for over 2 years. "This is enough to destroy him," Kate said, as we reviewed our evidence. "Financial fraud, theft of intellectual property, misuse of company resources. He'll be lucky if he doesn't go to prison." I stared at the mountain of evidence we'd collected. Months of careful documentation, proof of crimes that could end Michael's career forever. "When do we use it?" I asked. Kate smiled. "The company gala is in 3 months. Perfect timing for maximum impact." August brought a heat wave that seemed to mirror the burning anger growing inside me. As Kate and I continued our investigation, we uncovered layers of Michael's deception that went far deeper than I'd ever imagined. What started as documenting an affair had become exposing a criminal enterprise disguised as a marriage. The worst discovery came on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon when Kate called me, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Rachel, you need to come over right now. I found something that's going to make you sick." I drove to Kate's apartment with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. She met me at the door with her laptop already open, her face grim. "I managed to access Michael's personal email account," she said, leading me to her kitchen table. "The one he thinks you don't know about." What I saw on that screen changed everything I thought I knew about my husband. There were hundreds of emails between Michael and Jessica dating back almost 3 years. 3 years. Our entire marriage had been a lie for half its duration. But it wasn't just the timeline that destroyed me. It was the content. "Read this one," Kate said, pointing to an email from 6 months ago. Jessica, you should have seen Rachel's face when I told everyone at the client dinner that she gets confused with numbers. She actually believed I was trying to help her by explaining the budget breakdown again. She's so pathetic she doesn't even realize when she's being humiliated. Sometimes I think she actually enjoys being treated like an idiot. Jessica's response was even worse. Poor little Rachel. Does she still believe you love her? It's almost sad how desperate she is for your approval. At least it makes our job easier. I felt bile rise in my throat. Our job? Kate scrolled down to show me more emails. What I read made my blood run cold. Michael and Jessica hadn't just been having an affair. They'd been systematically planning my professional and personal destruction. They had spreadsheets tracking my projects, noting which ones they could sabotage and which ones Michael could steal credit for. They'd identified my closest work relationships and developed strategies to poison them. Look at this, Kate said, opening another email thread. They've been planning this for over a year. The emails detailed their strategy with clinical precision. Michael would gradually undermine my confidence and competence at work, while Jessica gathered intelligence about my daily routines, my friendships, even my therapy appointments after my mother died last year. She's been seeing Dr. Martinez for grief counseling, one email read. Perfect opportunity to plant seeds about her mental instability. I'll mention to Blackstone that I'm concerned about her emotional state affecting her work performance. I remembered that conversation. Michael had seemed so caring when he suggested I might want to take some time off after a particularly difficult session. I'd thought he was being supportive. Instead, he'd been building a case for my incompetence. The emails revealed that Jessica had been feeding Michael information about my work schedule, my client meetings, even my lunch plans. She'd been watching me, reporting back to him like I was some kind of target under surveillance. But the most devastating discovery was a folder labeled Exit Strategy. Inside were detailed plans for our divorce. Michael had already consulted with a lawyer about how to minimize his financial obligations to me. He'd researched ways to claim that my mental health issues made me unfit to receive alimony. He'd even identified which of our shared assets he could hide or transfer before filing papers. He's been moving money, Kate said, showing me bank statements she'd somehow obtained. Small amounts, transferred to accounts you don't know about. He's been preparing to leave you with nothing. The final blow came in an email dated just 2 weeks ago. The gala will be perfect timing. I'll humiliate her publicly one last time, really drive home how unstable and incompetent she's become. Then I'll file for divorce the following week, citing irreconcilable differences and her inability to handle professional stress. By the time she realizes what's happening, I'll have already secured my position at the company and protected my assets. She'll be too broken to fight back effectively. I stared at the screen, reading my husband's plan to destroy me, written out like a business proposal. Every kind word, every moment of seeming support over the past 3 years had been calculated manipulation designed to break me down. Rachel, Kate said gently, there's more. She showed me emails discussing other women at the company. Michael hadn't just targeted me. He'd been harassing female colleagues for years, using his position to intimidate and manipulate them. 2 women had quit because of him, and he'd bragged about it to Jessica. I wasn't just his victim. I was his latest victim in a pattern of abuse that stretched back years. But as I sat there reading the evidence of my husband's cruelty, something unexpected happened. The crushing weight of betrayal began to transform into something else entirely. Pure, focused rage. The rage that consumed me after reading those emails was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. For 3 days, I could barely eat or sleep. I'd catch myself staring at Michael across the breakfast table, wondering how someone could smile so warmly while planning such calculated cruelty. But by the 4th day, that rage had crystallized into something far more dangerous: cold, methodical determination. Kate found me in her apartment that Saturday morning, surrounded by printed emails and bank statements, mapping out Michael's crimes like a detective working a murder case. Rachel, you look terrible, she said, setting down coffee and studying my work. But this is brilliant. I'd spent the entire night organizing our evidence into categories: financial fraud, theft of intellectual property, harassment of female employees, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Each section was meticulously documented with dates, amounts, and corroborating evidence. "The gala is in 6 weeks," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. "Michael wants to use it to humiliate me one final time before destroying my life. Instead, it's going to be the night his world ends." Kate sat down beside me, studying my plans. "Tell me what you're thinking." "Michael's expecting the broken, confused wife he's been creating for the past year. So that's exactly what I'll give him. Right up until the moment I don't." I pointed to the timeline I'd created. "He'll make his speech, probably something designed to embarrass me in front of everyone who matters. The whole room will see poor, pathetic Rachel getting humiliated by her successful husband. And then they'll see who Michael really is." Over the next 2 weeks, Kate and I refined our plan with military precision. She would create a multimedia presentation that would play automatically on the gala's main screen, triggered by a timer we'd set for exactly 10 minutes after Michael inevitably grabbed the microphone for one of his impromptu speeches. The presentation would start with the financial evidence: clear, undeniable proof of Michael's embezzlement displayed in easy-to-read charts and graphs, bank statements, credit card records, forged expense reports. Everything laid out so simply that even the most financially illiterate person in the room would understand that Michael had been stealing from the company for years. Then would come the personal evidence: screenshots of his emails with Jessica, including their plans to destroy me and their mockery of my grief counseling, audio recordings of conversations where Michael bragged about manipulating female employees, photos of the gifts he'd bought Jessica with company money, including the diamond bracelet she'd been wearing to work lately. "The key," Kate explained as she worked on the technical aspects, "is to make it impossible for him to deny or explain away. No ambiguity, no room for interpretation. Just cold, hard facts that speak for themselves. But we needed more than just evidence. We needed witnesses who mattered." I began carefully reaching out to people who could make or break Michael's career. Mr. Blackstone, obviously, but also the company's biggest clients, the board members, and the local business journalists who always covered the gala. I started with Margaret Chen, the CEO of our largest client account. Michael had been overcharging her company for months, padding invoices with fake expenses. I invited her to lunch under the pretense of discussing next year's marketing strategy. "Margaret," I said carefully over salad, "I've been reviewing our billing practices, and I think there might be some discrepancies you should know about." I didn't give her details. Not yet. But I planted enough seeds of doubt to ensure she'd be paying very close attention to anything involving Michael at the gala. I did the same with 3 other major clients, each conversation carefully crafted to raise questions without revealing my hand. By the time the gala arrived, half the room would already be primed to look critically at Michael's business practices. The hardest part was maintaining my performance at home. Michael had ramped up his psychological warfare, sensing that something was different about me, even though he couldn't identify what. He'd make cutting remarks about my appearance, my intelligence, my worth as a wife and employee. Each comment was designed to chip away at whatever confidence I had left. "You know, Rachel," he said one evening as we got ready for bed, "I've been thinking you might want to consider a different career path. Marketing clearly isn't working out for you." I looked at him in the mirror, this man who'd stolen my ideas and presented them as his own for years, and smiled sweetly. "You might be right, Michael. Maybe it's time for a change." He smiled back, thinking he'd won another small victory in his campaign to break me. If only he knew that in 2 weeks, he'd be the one needing a new career. The morning of the gala, I woke up before my alarm and lay in bed listening to Michael's steady breathing beside me. In 12 hours, our marriage would be over. In 12 hours, his career would be destroyed. In 12 hours, everyone would know the truth about the man sleeping peacefully next to me, completely unaware that his world was about to implode. I slipped out of bed quietly and stood in front of my closet, choosing my outfit with the same care a general might select armor for battle. The black dress I'd bought specifically for tonight hung waiting, elegant, sophisticated, and strong. Not the frumpy navy dress Michael had mocked me for wearing to the last company event. Tonight, I would look like the successful, confident woman I'd been before he spent 3 years systematically destroying my self-worth. Michael was already in the shower when I came downstairs to make coffee. I could hear him humming, probably planning whatever cruel joke he intended to make at my expense tonight. Over the past week, his comments had become increasingly vicious, as if he was building up to some grand finale. "You know what your problem is, Rachel?" he'd said just yesterday. "You take everything so personally. Learn to laugh at yourself a little." This from the man who'd spent our entire marriage making me the punchline of his jokes. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate. "Everything's ready. Timer set for exactly 10 minutes after he starts talking. You sure you're okay with this?" I typed back, "More than okay. It's time." The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Michael left for the office around 10, claiming he had important meetings to prepare for the gala. I knew he was probably spending the day with Jessica, maybe even planning tonight's humiliation together. The thought should have hurt, but instead, it just made me more determined. At 3 o'clock, I went to the salon for the first time in months. Michael had been subtly discouraging me from wasting money on things like haircuts and manicures, part of his campaign to make me feel frumpy and worthless. But today, I got the works: hair, makeup, nails. I wanted to look absolutely stunning when his world collapsed. Kate met me at home at 5 to do a final equipment check. The presentation was loaded and ready, the timer programmed, the backup systems in place. We'd even arranged for a local business reporter to be in the perfect position to capture Michael's reaction when the truth came out. "Last chance to back out," Kate said, though we both knew I was far past that point. "He made his choice 3 years ago when he decided to destroy me," I replied. "Tonight, he faces the consequences." Michael came home at 6:30, already dressed in his tuxedo and reeking of expensive cologne. He barely glanced at me as I put on my earrings. "Try not to embarrass me tonight," he said casually, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. "I know these events can be overwhelming for you." I smiled at his reflection. "Don't worry, Michael, I think tonight will be very memorable." The ride to the hotel was silent, except for Michael's phone calls with various colleagues, discussing business deals and making plans for next week. Plans that would never happen, a future that would never exist. The grand ballroom at the Riverside Hotel was spectacular, decorated in gold and black with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over the 200 guests. I recognized faces from across the industry: clients, competitors, journalists, and city officials. Everyone who mattered in our professional world was here to witness what Michael thought would be my final humiliation. Instead, they were here to witness his downfall. Michael immediately began working the room, shaking hands and accepting congratulations on some deal he'd closed that week. I watched him charm client after client, knowing that in a few hours these same people would be looking at him with disgust and betrayal. Jessica arrived fashionably late in a red dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary, probably bought with company money. She and Michael exchanged meaningful glances across the room, and I saw her suppress a smile when she looked at me. She thought she was about to watch me get destroyed in front of everyone. At 8:30, dinner was served. Michael made small talk with the people at our table, occasionally making subtle digs at my expense that had everyone chuckling uncomfortably. I smiled and played along, the perfect good-natured wife. At 8:45, Michael excused himself to use the restroom, and I knew he was probably coordinating with Jessica about his planned speech. At 8:46, I checked my phone one last time and saw Kate's final text. Showtime. Michael returned to the table at 8:47, his eyes bright with anticipation and alcohol. He'd been drinking steadily all evening, which would only make what was coming more devastating. At 8:50, he stood up and reached for the microphone. Michael's hand closed around the microphone with the confidence of a man who believed he owned the room. The conversations around us gradually died down as people turned their attention to my husband. expecting another one of his charming speeches that always seemed to entertain everyone at my expense. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael began, his voice carrying that familiar tone of false warmth that I'd learned to recognize as pure poison. "I hope you're all enjoying this wonderful evening." Polite applause rippled through the ballroom. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, counting down the seconds until his world would end. 8 minutes and 30 seconds until Kate's presentation would begin playing on the massive screen behind him. "You know," Michael continued, swaying slightly from the wine, "they say behind every successful man is a great woman. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not always true." A few uncomfortable chuckles echoed through the room. Mr. Blackstone frowned slightly, but Michael was too drunk and too confident to notice. "Take my beautiful wife Rachel here." Michael gestured toward me with his wine glass, and I felt 200 pairs of eyes turn in my direction. "She tries so hard, bless her heart. Really gives it her all here at the company." My phone showed 8:52. 5 minutes and 30 seconds. "But you know what they say?" Michael paused for dramatic effect, that cruel smile spreading across his face as he prepared to deliver what he thought would be the killing blow. "She can't even satisfy her husband, let alone this company." The room erupted exactly as he'd planned. Some people gasped in shock, others laughed nervously, and a few of his buddies from sales actually cheered and raised their glasses. Jessica covered her mouth with her hand, pretending to be scandalized while her eyes sparkled with malicious delight. I felt the familiar burn of humiliation wash over me, but this time it was different. This time, I knew it would only last for exactly 5 more minutes. I stood up slowly, raising my own glass with a steady hand. "Thank you, darling," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. "You always know exactly what to say." More laughter rippled through the crowd. They thought I was playing along, being the good sport who could take a joke. Michael's smile widened, thinking he'd achieved the perfect public humiliation he'd been planning for months. "That's my girl," he said into the microphone. "Always such a good sport about everything." 8:54. 3 minutes. Michael launched into what sounded like an impromptu speech about marriage and partnership, but I could tell he'd rehearsed every word. He talked about the challenges of being married to someone who struggled with confidence, and how important it was to be patient with people who aren't quite at your level. Each word was designed to paint me as pathetic and incompetent, while making him look like a saint for putting up with me. The audience was eating it up, nodding along with his fake wisdom about relationships. 8:56. 1 minute. "The truth is," Michael said, building to what he clearly thought was his grand finale, "some people are just meant to be followers, not leaders. And that's okay. The world needs people who are content to stay in the background and let others shine." He looked directly at me as he said it, his eyes glittering with triumph. This was it. His final, devastating blow designed to ensure I'd never recover professionally or personally. 8:57. The massive screen behind Michael suddenly blazed to life. The first image that appeared was a bank statement showing a $15,000 charge to a luxury hotel in Miami, a business trip that Michael had taken with Jessica while I thought he was visiting clients in Chicago. The room fell silent as people tried to process what they were seeing. Michael's back was to the screen, so he didn't immediately realize what was happening. He was still smiling, still holding the microphone, when the second slide appeared. A screenshot of his email to Jessica calling me pathetic and too stupid to realize when I'm humiliating her. Someone in the crowd gasped. Then another. Michael's smile began to falter as he noticed people weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking behind him. He turned around slowly, and I watched his face transform from confident smugness to absolute horror as he saw his own words displayed in 72-point font for everyone to read. "What the hell is this?" he whispered, but his microphone picked it up and broadcast it to the entire room. The presentation continued relentlessly, financial records showing years of embezzlement, screenshots of emails detailing his systematic harassment of female employees, audio recordings of him bragging about stealing my marketing ideas, photos of expensive gifts he'd bought Jessica with company money. Mr. Blackstone stood up from his table, his face red with fury. Margaret Chen was already on her phone, probably calling her lawyers. The business reporter in the corner was frantically taking notes while her photographer captured every moment of Michael's destruction. "Turn it off!" Michael shouted, dropping the microphone and lunging toward the AV booth. But Kate had anticipated this. The system was locked and would run for exactly 15 minutes, ensuring everyone saw every piece of evidence we'd gathered. I stood up slowly, my voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom without any amplification. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "I'd like to announce that I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning. I'm also pressing charges for embezzlement, fraud, and theft of intellectual property. And for anyone wondering, I'll be starting my own marketing firm next month. Several of Michael's former clients have already expressed interest in working with me instead." Michael spun around to face me, his face a mask of rage and panic. "You can't do this! You're nothing without me! I'm done," I said simply. "I'm done being your victim, done being your punchline, and done pretending that any of this was my fault." I picked up my purse and walked toward the exit, my head held high. Behind me, I could hear the chaos erupting as Michael tried desperately to explain away the evidence still playing on the screen. Security was already moving toward him. Apparently, Mr. Blackstone had decided not to wait for the police. As I reached the ballroom doors, I heard Jessica's voice, shrill with panic. "Michael, what do we do? What do we do?" I smiled and stepped out into the hotel lobby, leaving my old life behind forever. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself again.